Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where first off, I'd like to say that I was honored to be a guest yesterday on the podcast Sitting Around Talking Movies with three fellow movie critics. Neil Rosen, formerly of New York One, Emmy-winning film critic. Also Bill McCuddy and Bill Bergoli. And we talked Justice League, we talked Justice League in comparison to Thor Ragnarok. And then we also, this was a particularly interesting conversation, we talked about Louis C.K.'s controversial and no longer theatrically released film, or released at all actually, I Love You, Daddy. Not only how the film came to be about, interesting backstory there, but also the film itself. I haven't seen it, but several of those gentlemen had. In the larger context of the Louis C.K. recent revelations, and then also, this was, I thought, a particularly interesting part of the conversation, whether or not Orchard should have pulled the movie. Basically decided, they didn't pull it from theaters, it never got there. Whether or not Orchard should have made that decision. And if you're interested in discussing any of those three movies, and we cover some other topics as well, I hope you'll give that podcast a listen. There's a link down below in the video description. And thanks again, guys, for having me on as a guest. Now let's get to today's morning movie news, where we're going to start with the viewer question, because I think just like Pablo Hernandez Diaz, who tweeted me about this late last night, this is a topic a lot of you are going to want to discuss. So why make you wait? Although you never have to wait to discuss a topic here on Morning Movie News, as there are always chapter times down below in the video description, so you can watch it in whatever order you would like. But I think the majority of you will be interested in this, so that's why we're starting with it. So here's the story. So late last night, Pablo Hernandez Diaz tweets me. Pablo tweets me all the time. Hi, Pablo. Always appreciate your tweets. And Pablo said, at Grace Randolph, 43% for Justice League from Rotten Tomatoes. I know you will talk about this tomorrow. I trust you, girl. I loved that tweet. I thought that was fabulous. So I responded to Pablo, and I said, Pablo, I don't really know what there is to say. It's pretty clear cut. It got a 43%. Let's see what the opening weekend numbers at the box office are. But I really liked Pablo's tweet. It really spoke to me. I appreciated his faith in me. So I kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I decided that there was something to discuss. So there's two things to discuss. The first is, and I've had a number of you actually ask me this since Pablo's initial tweet, and that's whether or not I think that 43% is fair as the rating. I think it's a little harsh. I personally feel if you're going to be like really cold and like just like justice for Justice League, you would have put somewhere in the 50s, right? I said the movie was 50-50 split between good and bad. But I think that if you want to like, I think critics should never give a movie a pass. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But I don't think they should be overly harsh on a movie. And I think that critics sometimes can give a movie a little push, like what they want to see. And you see that all the time, a little bit of a nudge, right? And so, sometimes if they think something, not good, they'll try and shut it down, like Passengers, or I think Misguided, Daddy's Home Too, right? There's that element always there. So I think that, I think Justice League gets a lot right. And so I think I personally would put it somewhere in the 60s in terms of where the Rotten Tomatoes score should be. And also considering that critics were just so incredibly harsh on Batman v Superman, unjustly so, why not go a little bit in the other direction, right? I mean, there certainly needs to be some mending in the relationship between film critics and DCEU fans. And I think things have only gotten worse, though, because that's the other thing to discuss. And that's that I think that the 43% really particularly stings, because it is better than the Rotten Tomatoes scores for Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, right? It's almost double, so it's got that going for it. But I think that when the social media embargo lifted late last week, it had seemed like critics were actually being quite positive about the movie. Fun was a word thrown around a lot, right? And 43% is certainly not a fun Rotten Tomatoes score. I actually, when I first saw the social media embargo lift, I browsed the tweets myself. I hadn't seen Justice League at that point. But I will tell you, my reaction was that I felt they were giving the movie maybe perhaps a little bit too much of a pass, right? And which is hypocritical, because I am still upset about the way Batman v Superman was treated, really dragged through the mud, stoned in the streets for entertainment value, I felt. So I felt that, how could you do that to Batman v Superman? And have a film that's problematic like Justice League, which is I think all the problems in Justice League are a result of the harsh criticism of Batman v Superman, and it's really unfortunate because I think, as I said in my non-spoiler review, the film is rendered, the DCEU is rendered innocuous in some ways through Justice League. It doesn't take any risks. It's not a bold, film, etc. So, it's like now you decide to give something a pass. It's like, thanks a lot. So I was kind of upset. It was a little annoying to me. But on the other hand, speaking of having an emotional reaction to the initial tweets when the social media embargo lifted, maybe some DCEU fans saw what they wanted to see, right? I mean, I tweeted out my emoji review, and when my non-spoiler review came out, and it was very, it was mixed, 50-50. Someone said, "Oh, I saw your tweet, your emoji pre-review, and you seem to love the movie." And I was like, my second two emojis were cringe-based. Of course it's a mix. You shouldn't be surprised that I felt it was a mixed bag. But I did start out with heart eyes emoji, and maybe some people just stopped there, and they were like, "Whew, sense of relief." So, maybe everybody's a little bit at fault, right? But I do think that the social media initial reaction when that embargo lifted was not representative of the 43% that resulted. So I don't know why critics did that. Maybe they didn't want to deal with DCEU fans. I don't know. Maybe they lied to Warner Brothers in an effort to try and move up the embargo date. I don't know why. I don't know why they would do it. But you would think that the social media tweets would match the reviews that would eventually follow, but they do not. And so I think that that's what makes the 43% sting in particular, because it did not seem that was the RT score that was promised when the social media embargo lifted. I mean, we really have to get the opening weekend box office numbers to get a complete picture of what's happened here. But I think that's the situation, and it's complex, as is everything with the DCEU. All right, so anyway, let's get to today's top 3 stories. Now, this was also something a number of you asked me about, and this is that Get Out has been categorized as a comedy or musical for the Golden Globes. And it made a lot of people very angry. It trended on Twitter all day yesterday, and Jordan Peele's not letting go of the story. He's making it an insult to Get Out, saying, "Oh, I think the exact quote was, what is everybody laughing at? Like, this is a serious social commentary movie." Well, here's the thing. This is how Universal decided to categorize the movie. They submitted it to the Golden Globes as a comedy or musical, and the Golden Globes said, "Okay." And this is a common strategy when it comes to the awards game. It's like submitting someone for Best Supporting Actress when they're really the best, they should be in the Best Actress category. This was a controversy with Alicia Vikander for The Danish Girl, but here's the thing. In Best Supporting, she won. And that's exactly what Universal is trying to do here. They feel that they might actually win at the Golden Globes for Best Comedy or Musical. But in drama, they're going to be up against Dunkirk, potentially Wonder Woman, Darkest Hour, Call Me By Your Name, etc. And they just feel it's unlikely that they would be able to beat those films. And if they can win in the Best Comedy or Musical category, right, that would give them a lot of momentum going into the Oscars, because it usually boils down for Best Picture to the 2 Golden Globe winners. Just like last year, Moonlight won Best Drama, La La Land won Best Comedy or Musical. That was definitely a musical, but it had serious elements to it, and you can see it was in that category. So, now also Jordan Peele apparently was not, he wasn't consulted in how to submit the film, right? And that's a Hollywood reality. Even though it's his movie and he has such intense ownership of it and it was so successful, Universal still didn't say, hey, maybe they didn't want him to maybe say no. But he had gone quiet for a little bit when people started asking him about it. Like, his initial comments were like, "That's ridiculous." And then maybe somebody was like, "Universal wants this." And he was like, "Oh, maybe I should be quiet." And then maybe he decided, "No, my fans will be upset with me if I stay quiet." But I think he should really just own up to this is the way the awards game works. And I think that as upset as everyone is right now about this being in the Best Comedy or Musical category, think about how happy you'll be when it does win. I think there's a very strong chance that it will, and it has tremendous momentum going into the Oscars. That could totally be a stepping stone to getting in the actual Best Picture Oscar. But if it loses in the Golden Globes in drama, it's pretty much done in its chances to win at the Oscars. So why do that to itself? So I think this is a mistake for Jordan. I think it's a mistake to make this an issue. I think it's not being explained correctly, and I think Jordan Peele is making a mistake jumping on the bandwagon. I think he's only hurting himself. Because then, here's the problem. If Jordan Peele makes it offensive for Get Out to be nominated as a comedy or musical, the Golden Globe certainly isn't going to double down on that offensive by being a winner for comedy or musical, right? What are you laughing at? Well, I guess nothing, so I'm not going to vote for your movie. And then he won't, that's really bad. If you don't win in comedy or musical either, I think that's a mistake. It's been done. Let's go with it. All right, so that's that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day, this comes out of Mexico. More great news for Pixar's Coco. It's really just a publicity dream, although they're not really utilizing it, which I find weird. But here's the headline. In less than a month, Pixar's Coco has become the top grossing film of all time in Mexico, with the equivalent of 43 million. So once again, that shows you how small other markets are. That's the most money any movie has ever made in Mexico, 43 million. And Disney once again beats its own record, with the previous top film being The Avengers. But still, this could possibly translate to a big play here in the United States with Spanish-speaking and Latino audiences, right? Maybe they'll be like, this did so well in Mexico, we should definitely have to support it. And there's a decent chunk of change there with that audience. Eugenio Derbez's Instructions Not Included, for instance, in 2013, picked up 44.4. It's the highest grossing Spanish language film ever in the United States. Now, 44.4 is not great, but I think Coco's going to need all the help it can get. Also, I just don't think Disney's doing enough with this. I think this should be a huge selling point. I think to go and tell American audiences that this is the highest grossing film ever, all films included, including live action, in a country which it spotlights. Coco spotlights Mexico, and it's not even made by people for the most part from that country. And they got it right. I think that's an amazing accomplishment, and it certainly makes me more interested in the film. I'm going to see that next week. Press screenings haven't been showing the Olaf short in front of it, so I'm going to go so I can see it. So my review will go up Wednesday. I'll see it Tuesday night. But I think it definitely makes me a lot more interested because while I wasn't particularly interested in Dia de los Muertos, to know that they got it right and that Mexico has fallen in love with this movie, it makes me feel like I'll learn a lot about Mexican culture, which I'm not particularly familiar with. So I think it's fabulous. I think it's great. So good for Coco, and that's certainly also going to help I'm sure they'll be bringing up in its awards campaign, which they've already started. So I think that Coco is looking more and more like a shoo-in for Best Animated Feature. Then the final story of the day, another family film, Paddington 2, has not only made it out of the Weinstein scandal alive, it was supposed to be distributed by that company, but is actually better off. So they were trying to jettison the picture because the Weinstein company is going down. They tried to stay alive, but it's not working out, and they didn't want to take Paddington 2 with them, to their credit. So it was out for other distributors to pick it up. And it looks like Harry Potter producer David Heyman, who also produces the Paddington movies, called in a favor from his wizarding friends at Warner Brothers as they ended up with the picture. By the way, on a side note, David Heyman also just signed on to produce Quentin Tarantino's new movie. Isn't that crazy? Harry Potter, Paddington, and Tarantino. One of those things is not like the other, but I think that's fabulous. And Warner Brothers paid $30 million for the right to distribute it domestically. It's still set to open January 12th here in the United States, so they got to really rush to launch this thing. But the first movie did $76.2 million here in the United States. Not fabulous, but the Weinstein company, I think, has had a problem for a while now, and some people have speculated that it was the weakness of Weinstein that allowed the story to finally come out. But it's a great movie. I absolutely adored it. As I've told you before, I think it has a really positive, constructive view of immigration, and I think it's wonderfully British. It's just, it's both, I think, very faithful to the original version of Paddington, but also modernizes it in a really exciting way. From the wonderful bear, the Peruvian bear, to a modern British family. I think it's great. And globally, it made $268 million. So that's very, very strong. So I think that considering the global strength of the brand, Warner Brothers not only will release it, but perhaps it's a potential asset to them. Warner Brothers is pretty darn good, for the most part, getting stuff out there. So I would love to see Paddington. Maybe this could be a step for him in the right direction, to be showing up in theme parks, more in stores, etc. Because the Weinstein company, that wasn't really their wheelhouse. So I'm so happy for the Paddington franchise. I think this is a fabulous development, and I hope that Warner Brothers truly becomes a home for the Paddington movies. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to hearing your thoughts down below, as well as what stories you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.